I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby, here with Betsy Paterson, Visual Effects Supervisor on HBO's Peacemaker. Now, first of all, Betsy, it's been a while since production on the series finished up. Thinking back, what was your highlight overall from this experience of bringing Peacemaker to life on screen?
Really working with James Gunn. He's a great guy to work with. He's just got such a focused, clear vision of what he wants that it's just makes it easy and a joy to kind of bring it to life.
And what does he bring to the table? Because I know he's very involved. Obviously, he writes, he directs, he produces.
Mm-hmm.
He's got the vision in his head. Did he have a lot to do with your work on the VFX?
He likes to stay pretty tightly involved. So, all through post, we met at least weekly, usually a couple of times a week, to go over stuff. I kept it running on the day-to-day, but then we would present, that day's scene or batch of shots for whichever episode we were working on. He definitely had a hand in at least the big stuff. Some of the smaller stuff he let me handle on my own because he didn't really need to approve every car comp.
No, that's right. And also you can leave it up to the expert, and I think you've been around for a while now. I think you know what you're doing. Before we do a deep dive into some of the awesome VFX and the sequences in the show, can you talk us through, for all the lay people watching this who may not completely understand, the pre-production steps of conceptualizing the look and feel of the show, and then of course taking it through previs, and how closely you adhere to previs, and then of course even post-vis, and making sure that you are replacing temporary effects with the real thing later on. That all sounds very confusing to me, so let's go through that.
Well, pre-production is really all about making sure that all of the creatives on the show understand the vision of the show and the tone and the look and feel, so that we kind of are all plugged in together. So we had a lot of meetings, pretty much all of the creative meetings. We would have all of the department heads together so that we could kind of see what the other people were doing and make sure we kind of all kept cohesive. James does his own boards that are kind of like little thumbnail sketches of each scene as we go. So that kind of leads us into the design phase. We see what the creatures and characters need to do, and that really influences the design of them. My first step is usually collecting nature reference. It's like, okay, if this thing were in the real world, what would it look like? So we kind of collect all the various pieces and do lots of Google image searches and just start to narrow in on what strikes a chord with everybody, and what James thought, oh yeah, that really kind of has the feel that we're looking for. And then from there we have concept artists kind of start to put it all together and take the various pieces that we liked from different reference and start to kind of create the look of the creature. So for the butterflies especially, that stage was very important because those creatures were really out of thin air. We had there's no precedent for what they look like or how they behave. So there was a lot of talking things through and research in that phase.
Yeah, there's no reference point for that, and the scale of them as well. Not only are they small in the scene, but then there are some scenes where there's thousands of them in a swarm. Would you say that was probably, like, before you really started to get into production, that was probably the stuff that was keeping you up at night most? Like, what was the thing that you were most thinking, this is going to be tough?
Well, the butterflies were certainly technically tough. Anytime you have a flock like that, it's very difficult to kind of control the behavior in such a way that you don't have to hand animate every single one of those thousands of butterflies. But at the same time, it has enough character and you have your select hero ones. So I knew that was going to be probably one of the biggest technical challenges. But the thing that I worried about the most was, of course, Eagly, and making sure that he really came off as a real eagle, but just lovable, and you really understood his character and his acting.
I love Eagly so much. Let's talk about him. I'm assuming it's a him. I'm just gendering him now, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, it's a him. I love it in the credits when he misses his mark. That's my favorite thing about the opening. It's just so perfect. It's so James
yes,
Gunn. Um,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So talk me through the. I mean, what's how do you start the process? Because he's very realistic. Talk me
Mhm.
through everything about putting him together and making him such an integral part of the show.
Well, I mean, we identified Weta as our main vendor early on, and of course they do amazing creatures. They have a lot of experience, but they actually haven't done that many birds. So they started diving in immediately to make sure that they could handle the feathers, and they could really produce that level of photorealism on a TV schedule. So that's what they spent their early months doing, pre-production. And we brought on a company called Proof to do our early visualization and previs and animation tests. So they kind of started in with a very simple model, but just doing some tests to kind of figure out exactly what scale he should be, what kind of walk does he have? Because one of the things that makes Eagly different than most eagles is he walks a lot, just to
Yeah.
kind of keep him in the scene and with everybody else. Whereas a real eagle would probably fly more or hop. But Eagly has to really walk around a lot. So his walk became a very distinctive part of his character. And that was all the kind of stuff we discovered during pre-production.
Yeah. I remember speaking to, it was Nick Davis, I think, when he was nominated at the Oscars for The One and Only Ivan. It just reminds me that when I speak to visual effects supervisors who have to work on productions where there's realistic, photoreal looking animals, that is apparently more challenging than doing some crazy kind of sci-fi effect, because we normally suspend disbelief for that stuff. But for the animals, if they don't look and feel authentic, we're out of the story. So is that something that
Yeah,
always occurs to you when you're putting this together?
absolutely. And that's why I say that was kind of the effect that kept me up at night the most, just because you really have to find that line between photorealism, but still having a character and he's an actor in the show in a lot of
Yeah.
ways. So you have to make sure that you care about him and you can kind of feel his personality, but at the same time, you don't doubt that it could be a real eagle doing these things.
Yeah, and then of
So
course you in halfway through the season you've got the gorilla that also
mhm.
needed to be put together. And I mean, God, I'm an idiot, but I completely forgot that was a visual effects because I thought it was an actual gorilla. I don't know why, but my brain didn't quite get there. So that would have been difficult too, because we've seen gorillas on TV before, like CGI
Sure.
ones, but this one was really good.
Well, that was another advantage to having Weta, because it really was not that hard for them. They have done
They've
many,
done it.
many
Yeah.
apes and gorillas, so they pulled that one went very smoothly. Really, I mean, I think the hardest part was just choreographing the fight, and then we had a stunt guy, and he had kind of extensions on his arms, big padded extensions, so that he could fight like a gorilla.
Yeah.
So that it was all choreographed out and filmed that way, and then you have to erase him and put in the CG gorilla.
Right, of course. So then you've
Yeah.
got, that's the photoreal stuff that you work on, and then of
Mm-hmm.
course in the finale you've got some bonkers VFX sci-fi stuff like the butterflies and that huge alien cow, an enormous
Yep.
thing. So
Yep.
that's conceptualized as a design, and then of course it's brought to your team to bring it to life. Talk us through
Mm-hmm.
that process.
Well, the cow is a little different than your average creature, just because it doesn't really move around a lot. He's attached to the ceiling, or she. We decided it was a she.
Of course, yes.
Um, she's basically trapped this whole time, and
Yes.
the idea there was to feel sorry for her and understand that she's in pain and not enjoying the process of being milked. Um, but in a lot of ways, it started out as more of a production design issue, and kind of our production designer did quite a few sketches, and the the um, the drawing that sparked the most with James, that he thought, oh yeah, that's the character, actually came from the production designer
Wow.
originally. So we kind of built off of that, and started modeling and building it into our sets, and went from there. And there was a lot of back and forth over how big it really was, because in the script it's described as big as the Empire State Building, but that turns out to be quite large
That's
and
big.
difficult to stage.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of tests there and came down to about 300 feet, I think.
Yeah,
in terms
it's
of
still big.
the length of it.
I remember
It's still very big. It's
that
very
is
big.
that is a big, whatever the hell it is, cow.
Yeah.
There's nothing like this show on TV. Honestly, I just think it's so wild, outrageous, funny, subversive. It's so unapologetic and unique.
Yeah.
That's what I love. What do you think? Like, it's irreverent, and do you sometimes smirk when you're thinking, "Oh God"?
Oh yeah. I mean, especially in those scenes with the cat cow and Danielle falling out of it with the guts, and just having to do those shots and having long discussions about the look of the guts and the mountainy splatter when it hits the floor. And every now and then we'd all go like, "Oh my God, this is insane." But it worked. It really worked. Yeah. So it was great to work on.
It's such a fun show to watch. I can't imagine you guys are having a ball. You're probably working your asses off too, but you're probably having some fun with it too, right?
Yeah. It was a good mix of both, that's for sure.
Yeah. You kind of touched on this, but it's fascinating when I speak to visual effects teams, like for example, the ones on Moon Knight and some of the other big shows that they're in the same genre as Peacemaker, that there's so much collaboration that must happen with costume production design, and particularly makeup and hair, not only because you mostly have to accentuate what we see for scale, or because it's robotic or whatever it may be, but just so that you're all consistently designing for the same look and feel. So is that really important, that you have a good relationship with those department heads?
Absolutely. And it really helped that right from day one, we were on all the Zoom calls all together. So, costumes would present and I'd get to watch, and I'd do my presentation, and the other department heads would watch. So, we were kind of all in it together, and we would hear James's reactions to the different things. And it really helped us focus in as a group on the look and feel of it, because it's an interesting tone. At first it feels like, oh, it's just realistic Northwest US kind of feel, but especially as it goes on, there's more and more crazy stuff that happens, but it's so important that it feels grounded and in reality, despite insane things like flocks of aliens and cat cows hanging from the ceiling.
And the people who are infiltrated by the butterflies do some really wild stuff, like when they're eating, and they're kind of like pod people. Was there any particular inspiration in how you were going to make that work?
I mean, it was really just in the script as described, as this weird purple tube comes out of their mouths. And we did a lot of research on bugs and proboscises that do that same thing. So that's what it was based on. But there was we were kind of trying to come up with the whole physically what it actually was, and we decided that it's the esophagus inside out that's being caused to extend that way. So it's part of the human's body, but being controlled by the butterfly.
That is wild. Yeah, it's an esophageal proboscis, I think is where.
And like that. Not that really matters, but it helps us to kind of have a logic to it, and because the butterfly is just this thing in its head. So how is it doing this? And we realized, well, it's using parts of the body to get what it needs.
I found that really interesting. I never thought we'd be talking about esophagi, but here we
are. It's that kind of show.
My final question is something that a lot of people don't realize, and how much VFX supports the narrative in a very subtle way. So you're doing all the really cool, explosive stuff that we are, that it's breathtaking, but there's so much going on in a supporting way that is very important. Can you point to any particular examples where VFX was critical in making something work they couldn't do in camera?
There were a lot of little things with the White Dragon, of course, flying, and sometimes his suit would be super powered. In the beginning of the series, the rocker chick fight, there was actually quite a few visual effects in that. She's not actually cutting up John Cena as they fight, and neither one of them jumps out of a 5-story building. In fact, that building was only 2 stories, and we extended it to make a taller building. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great fight.
Quite a bit in the finale, obviously, with the whole fight and kind of the area where we were shooting needed quite a bit of kind of work to just shape it into exactly what we needed to pull that scene off. So there were quite a few invisible effects in that scene.
Yeah, I always like to bring it up because it just points to so much of the work that you're doing that perhaps doesn't get noticed. On that note, Betsy, thank you so much for your time today. That was really enlightening.
Yeah.
You did such a beautiful work on this show. I hope we see you on the Emmys.
Thank you.